First of all, I just want to say, as a personal commentary, that I've learned a ton in the last 2 days, and I just want to say I'm super grateful for being here and being invited. I'm an MD who got here as a designer, a behavior designer specifically, by asking the question, why do people not do what they know they should do or what they actually say they want to do? And this came from a patient that I had in a clinical study in a collaboration with Duke when I was a medical director for a very large organization. And we were doing a metabolic syndrome intervention head-to-head study. And she was in one of the arms, and I just did kind of a check-in with her. And she said, I said, how's it going? She said, it's going great, I'm learning so much. She goes, but I know what I should do. I just don't know why I don't do it. And it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks upside the head. And fast forward, I went to Stanford and studied with BJ Fogg in the behavior design lab there in pursuit of this question. And out of that, started Engaged In, which is a behavior design firm for health and wellness. And basically, you can think of us as, you know that phrase, you can lead a horse to water. You want to finish it? You can't make him drink. So in our world, what we do is we put peanut butter in his mouth, or we clarify the water so it looks really good and tasty, or we, strap water onto his muzzle so that it's super easy and he doesn't have to lift a finger to drink the water. So that's what we do in terms of designing to make that happen, that behavior happen. So I think people are primarily well-meaning. I can't think of a single person I've ever talked to who didn't have the good intentions of doing the right thing. And I've worked with prisoners and people that are typically thought to be horrible people, but they're not. They really mean to do the right thing. But on the other hand, we're completely irrational and illogical and hypocritical. And so right now we're going to dive into that hypocrisy that we all have in our lives and figure out what's going on in the brain that makes that so. And I'll tell you as a preface that each one of these slides could be its own talk. So we're just going to skim through this at hyper warp speed. Looking at FH, from our point of view, this is how we see the world. It's asymptomatic, meaning there's no triggers there for behavior to link onto. There's a low emotional state until an event, then you've got this huge spike of emotion that is what we call unstable but strong in motivational terms. We've got a huge signal around denial, couldn't be me. It's also really daunting and confusing. And there's a question in the minds of the patients of lifelong. Even though we know it to be lifelong, there's all this kind of funky, no, denial, it's not lifelong, that kind of stuff with these kinds of diagnoses that patients react to. And there's also an association because of there's another form that is more common and more typical around bad behaviors, eating too much, not exercising, that kind of thing, that there's a negative, connotation there. Similar to in diabetes, the type 1s feel, and collectively there's an emotion around, I didn't do this to myself, but the type 2s did. There's kind of that split in the camp. So I really just have three points. One is target the fast brain. Number 2 is self-image is the gateway to all engagement and behavior. And number 3 is there's no new behaviors. Target the fast brain. So historically, we have targeted the slow brain, the forebrain, with education and logic, and we've had conversations about that here. When in reality, our fast brain, our unconscious mind, our system 1 brain, is driving 95% of our behaviors. And this is really efficient because we have 11 million inputs a day that we're sifting through, and we need to cut it down. We need to create shortcuts and ways to manage and get through our day without being bogged down by those 11 million inputs. And then, the modern situation is that we're even more distracted than ever because we have our little smartphones, and I can see some of you are also using that right now, which is fine. It's fine. I'm not offended at all. I'm just saying, I'm pointing out that we're just trying to manage all this incoming stuff, and we're just kind of sifting through, and we're kind of listening to Kyra, and we're kind of watching our email, and we're kind of, drifting and thinking about our flight or whatever we're doing, right? But what that means is that we have this Homer Simpson dough experience going on. And what I mean by this is that our fast brain shoves the cookie into our mouth before our slow brain remembered, oh, I didn't want to eat that cookie, Or if anybody's ever tried to do Lent, that's another one, giving up something for Lent, and then the first day of Lent going, oh yeah, I'm on Lent. So that's the kind of pace. Another example is you're on the internet and you're here to do something, and then some sort of clickbait takes you somewhere else, and fast forward 20 minutes later, you're looking at Kim Kardashian's selfie book, and you don't know how you got there. So that's the fast brain taking you on a little trip, and your conscious mind wakes up a little bit slower than usual. So with our team, we do this all the time. 100% of our time is fascinated with this kind of unconscious mind, fast brain stuff. And one exercise we did with our team was we took a bunch of mail, and we kind of closed our eyes and we passed it out. And it was amazing to me that we knew in less than a second where that piece of mail was going to, just by the feel of it, just by the weight of it, the feel of the paper, that kind of thing. We knew whether we were going to open it or whether it was going straight into the recycler. So these are the sort of fast brain, heuristics that we call it. Heuristics just means, the sensory aspects. If I'm holding a cup of hot coffee and I'm talking to you, I'm going to feel much warmer to you than if I'm holding a cup of ice water. Like there's little groupings, if you will, of experience that the brain is trying to make everything as neat and tidy and categorized as possible. And that happens without our knowledge, and it happens without our consciousness. So in designing for these different aspects of the brain, and these are, for those of you who are neuroanatomists, please forgive, this is just a really rough metaphor to categorize things. But if you look at the far right, the forebrain type strategies are plans, goals, strategies, use your willpower, decisions, make a decision, and go to classes, those kinds of things. Those are the sort of typical health intervention cascade. In the middle, midbrain, is a metaphor for the amygdala, the emotional centers, so this is kind of what's really happening. People are emotionally eating, they're zoning out, they're trying to, reduce their stress, they're checking out, or all their emotions are kind of operating and driving them around. And that's happening at a faster rate than the other stuff, the forebrain activities. Then there's the hindbrain. That's that sort of immediate fight or flight response, right? Cortisol-driven, dopamine-driven, stress-induced. You're craving things, you don't know why you're craving things. So this is kind of the world that we have to navigate as we want people to engage in their FH or contact their family members or those kinds of things. This is what we're up against. Second point is self-image is the gateway of all engagement. We filter everything through our me center. Okay, Ginger, I've had it. You stay out of the garbage. Understand, Ginger? Stay out of the garbage, or else. What they hear, blah, blah, Ginger, blah, 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 Ginger, blah, 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 blah. So we're hearing it through this filter of ourselves and our name. So the first thing that happens to any stimulus that we encounter is it goes through this filter of me, not me. I call it the me immune system. If it's not me, I attack it. If it's me, I let it in, right? And medicalization is a big problem here because with patients, if we call you a patient, if you call me a patient, I'm like, no. I'm a doctor, I'm Kyra, I'm a mother, I'm a surfer, I'm all these things before patient, which is way down here. Unless I have something that takes up a huge part of my pie, chronic disease or those kinds of things, then I might be willing to entertain that a little bit more, try it on. But who wants to be in the gown with all these happy people in scrubs? You want to be in the scrubs, right? You don't want to be these, So I don't want to be this guy, with the push-up. Who do you want to be in this picture, honestly? Do you want to be the encouraging guy with the hand on there? Or do you want to be the guy struggling with the, like that kind of thing? Or do you want to be this guy, You want to be that guy, right? So an example is take your hands and open them up, hands open, slap them together and lace them together. So on top is the thumb that equates to me. That's comfy. That's home. Open it back up, put the other thumb on top. That's not me. Very simple. This is how we make people feel when we take them out of their me zone. And then we have to maintain that sense. And it's very, very important because it protects us from feeling depressed. It gets us up in the morning. You know, I'm okay, I'm healthy, I'm strong. And if you give them counter messaging to that, then they're going to rebel or deny or find some way to resolve that cognitive dissonance. And with this self-image, what it's going to stick to is anything emotional that connects to the me, okay? So there's also little emotion receptors, if you will, of me that drive my decisions. So for example, Antonio Damasio, USC neuroscientist, had a patient that had a lesion in their amygdala, so he didn't have emotions. And he couldn't decide where to go for dinner because he didn't have a feeling about it. He sat there and tried to use logic for hours to try to figure it out, but it really was talking it through. He went in circles and circles and circles because he didn't have the emotion to land on a preference of some kind or the other. And some of you might be married to people like this, and it's really frustrating. So the third point is there's no new behaviors. And I like to call this law of conservation of behavior. For example, in my childhood, there used to be this kind of thing. And in my daughter's childhood, there's this kind of thing. But it's the same mental model. And so mental models are something that you have to design for, and you can use them on purpose, or they can happen to you. So for example, in FH, what I've heard this week, this weekend or whatever this week, is that there's mental models going off in these families' minds that we are not controlling. And we have an opportunity to design for those mental models. And Dr. Ballantine said about the sports analogy, and I also heard one just a moment ago about ketchup to tomato sauce or tomato juice. Those kinds of analogies and mental models are something that we can control and direct in the brain, because when we have a new piece of information, again, the brain is trying to find, what is this like? What is the analogy? Where can I group this with all the other things that I know? And it searches immediately for the closest match. And if the closest match is death or hopelessness or those kinds of things, then you've lost them. So we have to be really careful with that, and it's a missed opportunity, frankly. So what we're really trying to do with our brain is whenever there's a dissonance, whenever there's something that kind of alarms us or shocks us or scares us, we want to resolve that tension immediately. And we had a study at Stanford with mobile apps, and what we found was that people were self-triggering opening apps primarily to reduce small levels of anxiety. What's the weather like? What's the news like? What's on Facebook? Who sent me an email? Like that kind of thing. We are actually stimulating ourselves to seek after this behavior in order to reduce our anxiety or our tension of missing out or not knowing or those kinds of experiences. And we're not even aware of it. Another sort of pitfall, I would say, is behavior fantasy. This is a company called Zeo that had a headband, and they thought people would strap this to their heads and look sexy as they go to sleep every night. Of course, for people who don't have any partners or any romantic life whatsoever, it was a great product. But for everybody else, it failed miserably, and they are now out of business. Behavior greed is when you have something that actually is a real-life behavior, a behavior existing in nature, but you have too many of them, and you just overdo it. You overstrap it onto this poor guy, because the bandwidth is so small. And again, with stress and the busyness of people's lives, that bandwidth gets super, super tiny. So the solution for this is baby steps. And that's where my mentor, Dr. B.J. Fogg, comes in. He's the master at making things super tiny, bite-sized, that kind of thing. And there's two reasons for that. One is so that you get some adoption, some adherence, that kind of thing. And so be patient. You might want them to do a whole bunch of steps, but starting off with one builds that sort of first experience of like, okay, and you build a feedback loop of, I'm getting this. And number two, the result of that is confidence, which is where you want people to be at. Because again, we don't want to think that we're bad. We don't want to think that we're stupid. We don't want to think that we're lazy or unhealthy or those things. You want to play to the positives of how we see ourselves. And my last wish for you is, may you be engaging. May this talk and anything that I've shared with you go with you to make you better at what you do. I'm very inspired by all the work that all of you do in every aspect of this movement, and I'm just so privileged to be here. Thank you so much.